Good evening, everybody. I know that you guys are just coming in. The link is live now. So come on in and grab your seat. Welcome to Ichabod on a Thursday night. I know for most of us, you're like, wait, Thursday? Yes, Thursday. We're back live. And we've got a guest, as you can see on the screen. I'll do the introductions and all that very shortly, but y'all know the routine. I'm taking this link and going to paste it to Facebook so others can come and join us. But come on in and greet somebody in the chat. As we like to say here, greet somebody in reason's name.
I was gonna say, sounds like a pastor. It sounded like a pastor for a second. Turn to your neighbor.
Yeah. So we do something here called NERCH, is our not church services
I
every
like
other
it.
Sunday. So we sort of steal some of the tropes from church to kind of help them lose their, some of their
I'm
sting.
into it. Yeah.
Oh, death, where is thy sting? We like to say, oh, church, where is your sting? All right, I'm posting this to Facebook now. Um, Let me see who's in the chat. Anybody in the chat so far? Come on in.
I'm looking. Let's see.
Greet somebody in reason's name. Shake a hand, or at least put an
Five.
emoji up to let somebody know you're glad to see them.
Good evening.
First in the chat is the Heathen Queen. I know Mo Wheat was there first.
No,
What's
yeah.
up, Mo? What's happening? We gonna get it popping in a second. And for those who are like, man, I hate this part of the show where you guys are posting links and all that, we're about to go back to StreamYard in a matter of less than a week, probably, because of how it works with my schedule. I'll be back on StreamYard pretty soon. So we'll actually be able to go straight on air very shortly.
I mean, right to Zoom, because I don't think anybody likes that. None of us, including the host doing all of the posting and reposting
Yeah.
and clicks.
Yeah. But for those who do not know, I have with me the guest, Jessica HQ. And
Hello.
HQ does not stand for headquarters.
No.
It does not stand for health quarantine.
True.
It does not stand for hazardous questions. HQ stands for Heathen
Heathen
Queen.
Queen.
So
Yes,
welcome
yes.
to the show, guys. Heathen
Thank you.
Queen.
Thank you for having me.
And we've got to let's just start there. Why Heathen Queen? How did you come up with that name? And
Yeah, I wish that I could take credit
okay.
for it, to be honest. I did not come up with it on my own. When I was posting a lot of deconstruction or evangelical content on TikTok, as you know, all of those incredibly loving faithful would pop into my comments pretty relentlessly and, call me anything from like a heretic,
Okay.
but they really enjoyed heathen for some reason. And I personally found this hilarious because
Okay.
what what is that, what is heathen supposed to mean to me? But my followers who also found this funny started like jokingly referring to me as like queen of the heathens because they would all sort of adopt that moniker as well.
Oh, got you.
And I would start all my videos with hello heathens to sort
Okay.
of, as you sort of reclaim the like church tropes.
Yep.
I was
Yep.
just taking whatever these Christians were throwing
Yeah.
at me and just repurposing it. Funny story though is, while that was meant as a joke, it really caught on, and now I'm in an academic situation and like have to try and explain like what's going on. But it's
Yeah.
okay. It is what it is.
Yep. All good. Are there any, so I guess I was going to say that, think about women who, I guess, tried to redeem the B word, right? Calling themselves bad bitches and things like that. It's like,
Yeah.
you guys tried to make me feel bad about being, whether it was, aggressive or being a
Yeah.
feminist or being whatever. I'm going to take and own that. And then you could say that
Yeah.
there's some positives and some drawbacks from owning that. Are there
Yeah. When
any
you stand next to
drawbacks?
sexy red, you see two bad bitches. No, sorry. Um, I mean, I would imagine that probably using that word, as in like the B word, has more drawbacks than using heathen. Because honestly, heathen is kind of either like more of an antiquated term, like people know what it means, but it's not something you hear in everyday conversation, or if it's meant to be, or if it's used, it's largely used as kind of a joke,
Hmm.
you know, like, oh yeah, heathens.
Right, right.
So for me, like, I would say the only real drawback is that some people, um, want to be the same people that would call me this, by the way, will then turn around and say, like, oh, you're reveling in like your sin.
Yeah,
To be honest, though, that's not a drawback for me
gotcha.
because it just provides me further fodder to work with. But, you know,
Okay,
I guess that's like one way you could.
got you, got you. So you blew up on TikTok. You say over 300,000 people checking for your content on TikTok.
Well, not quite, but just under. Yes, yeah,
Just
yeah.
under.
So
Oh,
yeah,
we're
that.
gonna prophesy that into we're gonna speak that into
Thank you.
existence.
Hallelujah. Um,
I receive it.
yeah, I receive it. Like, yeah. So, I mean, when I started, I really did not anticipate that
Mm,
at all. I got on because I have four little sisters,
mm,
and they were peer pressuring me into getting on, but only because they wanted me to be able to watch the videos that they were sending me. And at the time, you like really you couldn't watch the whole video if you didn't
mhm.
have an account.
Okay.
Maybe it's still like that. I don't know. So I got on under a totally different name,
Mm,
had no intentions of doing anything like related to religion or evangelicalism. I didn't even know evangelical was a term at that time.
mhm,
And I stumbled in or onto deconstruction TikTok.
mm,
And I saw lots of people struggling with similar things or asking similar questions to what I had about 8 years prior when I
okay.
had found my way out of,
Mm,
I say found my way out of like Christianity. Honestly, that's for me, it wasn't an overnight process. I know some
mm,
people just walk away. For me, it was not that easy.
okay.
Uh, and so I started making video responses or videos about things that I had learned that I
Mhm,
wish I had known.
mm,
And then that took off for a while. But when it really like exploded in a kind of wild way, what was on a like just on a random day that I was sort of burnt out from making,
hmm,
not necessarily from making the content, but from dealing with all of the people in my
yeah.
comments saying stuff. So I just found a bunch of church signs that
Mm.
you wonder why nobody like proofread, not for like spelling errors, but because they're wildly suggestive.
Mm.
And I just read them with a completely straight face, like deadpan,
Mm.
and it exploded in
Wow.
a way that I definitely had not anticipated. It was just supposed to be like filler content
Right.
because I needed a little break. Uh, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then, you know, people came for the humor, stayed
Hmm.
for the
Right.
smarts, I guess, however you want
Let that be a lesson to you folks. You never know what'll do it for you, right?
to. You really don't. At least I
Wow.
didn't. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so you talked about 8 years prior to you getting on, you had worked through your own deconstruction, deconversion. Prophet of Zod just put up a video today that I want to actually have you speak to because he talked about deconversion or deconstruction, but I'll get
Okay.
to that in a second. You were a Christian for how long?
Man. I would say like 15, 16 years,
Okay.
something like that, somewhere in there. And I mean, that's counting. I grew up not from birth, but from a
Hmm.
pretty young age, deeply embedded in the evangelical church.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I say that I was a Christian for all of those years because that's
Hmm.
how I identified. That's what my whole life was structured around.
Hmm.
Um, if you're talking about when I sort of was old enough and had critical reasoning abilities, you know, a little bit less than that,
Hmm.
but about that long.
Okay. So for those who are familiar with my platform, I do a series called Life After Faith, where people talk about how they came to faith and then how they. I want to merge this with that a little bit, just to kind of.
Yeah.
On my platform, I have a lot of times Christians will watch because they're trying to figure out, are they where I ended up, where someone like you ended up. But before they can even have that conversation in their mind, they want to know, before they get to where you are, were you ever where they are?
Right.
And so, not that you have to do this or have to flash the badge and say, see, I really was one of you. But when you, quote unquote, were a Christian, why did you think you were a Christian? Like, what was it aside from the lifestyle and upbringing? Like, what did you believe and how sincerely did you hold it? That kind of stuff.
I mean, I held it incredibly sincerely,
Mm,
largely because for a long time I was told that, well, let me back up a little bit.
mm,
So I grew up technically non-denominational, but very similar to, I would say, like Pentecostal.
mm,
So extremely charismatic. Our church was a little less maybe conservative than Pentecostals. I knew a lot of Pentecostal people growing up, and like women couldn't wear pants, like couldn't
mm,
wear makeup, stuff like that. We could wear pants and wear makeup.
mm,
But this idea of Pentecost and of the spiritual gifts
mm,
and of Jesus returning in the near future,
mm,
all of that was very similar.
mm,
And I was being told all of this and
mm,
learning about it, like I
mm,
said, from about the age of like 8 or so on.
mm,
And I deeply believed it.
mm,
Like so much so that it honestly created like a lot of really unhealthy like anxiety
mm,
and stress and worry and compulsion
mm,
because I, like I said, was taught that Jesus will be coming back like
mm,
basically anytime.
mm,
And we were also firm believers in like the rapture,
mm.
but they weren't sure, like the people I grew up with and were taught by, they weren't sure if the rapture would be post, pre, or mid trib.
Okay.
So you really didn't know
I
if you were
remember
going to
that.
have to like live through the tribulation or not.
Mm,
But also we were very much taught that chances are you're going to suffer for your faith and likely
mm,
even be martyred for it.
mm,
Um, I mean, when Columbine occurred, I
mm.
was, I think, early middle school, and the only thing we were taught about it was that if someone came into our school,
Wow.
held up, to us, and asked if we believed in God, that we were to say yes,
Mm,
and that was like the highest honor,
mm,
effectively. Not like
wow.
we should maybe think about why kids in school shouldn't like have to deal with that.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
so like maybe other people don't find this like as radical or extreme as I now do,
mm.
but I think that's pretty extreme in terms of what you're being taught from the pulpit
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
on
Wow.
Sundays. Yeah. So and I
Mm,
so I was the kind of person who I went to youth group, I went to church, I did my devotionals every day.
mm,
I thought I heard God like speak to me.
mm.
Um, I never thought I heard like an actual voice, but
Right.
I definitely felt
The
like,
inner voice or
yeah, the
the
inner like
unctioning of the spirit.
sense. Exactly.
Mm,
Yeah, the like, conviction.
right.
Um,
Mm,
yeah, I was, you know, I'm a very analytical
mm,
person, and I remember from an early age being super interested in like apologetics, which
mm,
before anyone laughs at me, obviously looking back, apologetics is not that. But when you're like 11, 12, 13, 14,
wow.
15, like you think that you're like really diving into something that's like
Mm,
gonna strengthen your faith.
mm, wow.
Um, I went on missions trips.
Mm,
I went to an all Christian school for 3 years. I used to go street evangelizing.
mm,
I went, or I would do in church and on the street and everywhere else, like those skits, the dramas, whatever.
yeah.
Um, I did like summer trips up to
Hmm.
Canada where they did
So
like
you believe
these,
that people were actually going to hell?
oh, for sure.
And
And
that Jesus was
I
their way to
also,
go to heaven.
yep. And I also believe that like, this was the real, like, I don't want to cuss on your show, but like
Feel free.
mind fuck was
Okay.
that I would, I definitely believe people are going to hell.
Mm,
And I definitely believed that like it was possible that I could go to hell if I didn't have enough faith. But
mm,
I also didn't know how to know
mm.
how much faith I needed to have or what it
Wow.
meant to
Wow.
feel like you had faith, right? Like, what does that feel like? How do you,
Oh my
especially when you grow up
gosh.
in like a charismatic
Yes,
environment where
yes.
so much is based on feeling, what does that feel like to have enough? Especially
Mm,
when you
mm,
think
mm,
that like this is like what you believe. So okay, you believe it. If I
mm,
ever have a doubt, does that mean I don't have faith? If I
mm.
and the other here's the other thing is that like my church is big on saying, the Bible says if you have the faith of a mustard seed, that like
Right.
basically all you could move mountains, right?
Mm,
And we were taught this in a very literal sense.
mm,
And I'm thinking to myself, like,
mm,
I mean, obviously I'm not going to be moving any mountains, but even in that, it's like I can't even pray for like
mm,
something to happen, really, like something small,
mm,
and have it happen. I've never prayed for someone to be healed and had them healed. I've never like really, about the only
mm,
thing I could say that I had prayed for and had it happen were like really small things that
mm,
when I thought deeply about them made absolutely no sense
mm.
that these would be the things that were happening, right? Like, so yeah.
So, are you saying that that caused you to question whether or not you had enough faith because the things you prayed for didn't seem to actually happen?
I mean, that really was a smaller piece of it because I was also taught
Mm,
that God always answers prayers.
mm,
He just answers them yes, no, or not now.
right.
Well, how in the world are you supposed to know if God's answering a no or a not right now
Right.
as opposed to a yes, right? Like you
Mm,
just can't know. And like looking back, I see the reason it's put like that is
exactly.
so
It's
that
unfalsifiable.
exactly. But at the time, especially as someone that was like incrementally indoctrinated,
Hmm.
you just don't realize
Mm, mm, mm.
how like deeply problematic all of
Yeah.
these lines of thinking are because they're layered on
Yeah.
in smaller bits.
Mm, mm, mm. You said something that's very important. We did an episode, my last Life After Faith episode was with a guy named Jamal Luke. And he said, it's the title of the episode. He said, I felt, he said, I was saved, but I never felt safe.
Oof, yeah.
And that's sort of what you're talking about, this idea of, I believe as a young Christian, still saying, I believe that you could go to hell, and not for the reasons that many Christians would want to jump on you and say, oh, you weren't trusting Jesus. They would try to take away. But that's not what you said. It's not because I wasn't really trusting what he did on the cross. The idea of how much faith is enough. Like I believe, but what if I don't believe enough? Like
Yeah.
that is a mind fuck. Like people don't really think about how insecure their faith actually is. When you have
Yeah.
in the New Testament, you have Jesus supposedly saying to people, there are many who are going to say to me, I did this in your name, I did that in your name. Like I did spiritual things in your name. Like I didn't fake it, I did them.
Yeah.
And he's going to say to them, I didn't know you. Like,
Right. So
how
it makes you
secure can you
wonder,
be?
like, how do
Yeah,
you know?
right.
Like, how do you know? Yeah, I think that's spot on. And
Mm,
I mean, even something like, okay, I believe Jesus died on the cross.
mm,
Okay, uh, if I said to someone, do you
mm,
believe that Julius Caesar existed?
mm,
Right? You could say, like, yeah, I believe in that. And we have sources for that, and that's great. But, like, how are you measuring that level of belief? What
mm,
does that belief feel like to
right.
you? Right? If somebody said,
Mm,
well, how much do you believe like he existed? I
mm,
don't like on what scale, right?
right.
And then if they told you, well, Julius Caesar, we have sources that say he was divine, or
Mm,
like or became divine, right? You
mm,
could say you believe that. I mean, you probably wouldn't, but you
mm,
could.
mm,
And I would ask, okay, well, how do you know? How do you
mm,
know you believe that? How much do you believe that?
Mm,
How do you know it's that much that you believe that?
mm,
It's just, and it's when your whole eternal fate
mm-hmm.
hinges on this thing that you don't have any like measure to quantify. All you know is you have to have it in some
Mm.
measure.
Wow.
It's just like this
Yeah.
endless cycle of like,
Yeah.
well, is this the doubt that they're talking about? Like, or like, is this
Wow.
like, okay, but I should be worried about like,
Mm.
I'm told to constantly like sort of cultivate this faith. Like, okay, well, I'm trying to cultivate it. What is that supposed to feel like?
Well,
Like,
you're told to
how?
cultivate it, and you're told to make sure that you have it. Test yourself to see if you be of the faith that you're continually cultivating. Like, what the hell? Like,
How? Like,
right.
yeah. So I wouldn't say that that's like why, I mean, I think it probably ended up playing a role in why
Right.
I left, but I was also taught that you can't trust your feelings because
Mm-hmm.
your heart is deceitful above all things.
Mm.
And so basically, Satan's trying to trip you up from the inside
Right.
effectively. So then you're just,
Mm.
it just feels like this endless,
Yeah.
impossible spiral into like
Yeah.
nowhere.
Yeah. Anybody who's ever deconverted knows, and maybe I'm speaking to somebody's future who's watching right now, they know what it's like to deconvert and feel the weight of all that psychological pressure just evaporate. Like, I cannot begin to explain to you Jesus says, supposedly, take my yoke upon you. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. No, it's nowhere near as light as they make it seem. Deconvert and you'll see how light a burden can be. You'll see how much less pressure life can hold.
Well, it's like when people would like tell me growing up that if you leave the faith, that's when you'll be really unhappy. Like, girly, I don't know because I've never felt better.
Right.
Like there was definitely a period that was really hard and painful.
Mm. Getting
And
to
it
that
took
point.
time.
Yeah.
But like now I've learned so many of the things that I was taught were
Mm.
terrible and horrible about myself and things that I should constantly be on guard against and try to fight are like actually normal and fine. And
Mm.
like you learn to really, I mean, you're taught in the church to hate yourself, to
Mm.
hate your flesh,
Yeah.
right? And flesh is both your physical body,
Mm-hmm.
but also
Your
what
nature.
makes you what your nature.
Yeah.
Like that is so miserable. And to
Yes.
not have to do that
Yes.
and to like not have to honestly ignore a lot of your own logic or ignore
To be able to lean
um
on your own understanding.
yeah, because turns
Yeah.
out mine's pretty decent.
Okay.
Like, it's not perfect.
um, I want to switch to the deconversion real
Sure.
quick, but before I do, if you're out evangelizing and doing street ministry and sidewalk plays and missions trips and all that, if you're within your own heart wrestling with, do I have enough faith for this thing to actually stick and work for me? How are you commending it to others without also thinking, hope you guys have enough faith? Like, how's that work?
It doesn't. No. um so I think part of what I was taught as well was that
Hmm.
having faith meant like walking your faith out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also told that even if you doubt or feel unsure, that by doing that thing, you're actually proving your faith, right?
Mm.
So it's this weird circle where you're
Mm.
like, well, I don't know if I have
Mm.
enough faith, but I'm told that if I feel this way, that I should just behave like I do have this
Mm.
faith. So I behave like I do have this faith, and then I find that I feel I'm not sure if I have this much faith.
Mm.
And then I'm told that, okay, but you need to act like you have that much faith. And you're like, I mean, how do you
Yeah.
get out of that?
Well,
Um,
it's worse because you when you were asking the question earlier about Julius Caesar and how much do you believe? How do you know you believe? One of the things I was thinking was, well, you can kind of measure your belief based on whether you're willing to act on it.
yeah,
What are you willing to do based on that belief? Like, sit in
yeah,
this chair. Do you believe this chair can hold you? We'll sit in it then.
right.
Well, in a sense, that's sort of what we do when we were out evangelizing was we tell people to rest in Jesus. Do you really believe he could take you from this life to the next? Well, rest in him like you would sit in this chair. Well, how do you rest in him? And then you start thinking about what are you doing? What is your faith actually doing? But
Yeah.
then you have
Oh,
to
that guy
juxtapose
gave me
that.
insomnia, so I'm not really sure. Like,
You have to
sorry.
juxtapose this doing things to sort of like, how do I know I believe? Well, I'm doing X. You have to juxtapose that with, but faith is not about what you do, it's about what you believe. Like,
Yeah.
it's not a work. Belief
Yeah.
is not a work. So like you're always wrestling with whether it's a work, whether it's belief, whether it's enough belief. How do you know? We have to do this work. It's like you said, it's the
Yeah.
mind meld that's going on. Is okay. So
I'm calling Rico because this is like a racket.
we have an episode on this channel where we actually bring Jehovah up on a RICO case, where we go through the
That's
Old
funny.
Testament, just trying to say he's the mob boss behind the genocides, the slavery, the all of it. He ordered the hits. So at some point, you begin to ask questions, and it sends you into a period of now the doubts do surface, and you kind of let them, or you begin to ask questions and
Yeah. So through my later teenage years, I would say there were some cracks
mm,
because one, I again was in this very charismatic environment and I never had any of those
mm,
manifestations. And it was not for a lack of wanting
mm,
or asking or seeking. And I would honestly, it caused me a lot of emotional
I
distress
can imagine.
because when you're told that like these are the true signs, right? And these are what God gives the people that ask and seek and want and desire, but he's not giving them to you.
Mm,
You were wondering why. And then that feeds into like maybe I don't have enough
yeah,
faith. Well, how do
yeah.
I not know that? Like, and
You
you
don't
just
have
keep
to answer this, but I'm just curious. I know somebody else is curious. Did you speak in tongues when you were in
no.
there? Tried?
I tried, but not like
Waited for it to
tried as
hit you,
in
but it
like,
didn't hit you.
yeah. I waited a lot
Yep,
of waiting and a lot of
got you.
praying and a lot
Hmm.
of like trying to let my mouth, be
Hmm.
free, but like it just didn't happen.
When you were there, did you ever question the tongues that you heard, or did you think they're really doing it?
Oh, I for sure questioned them, but I think I questioned them more on the basis of the reading that verse that talking about the gift of tongues and it's
Hmm.
followed by interpreters of
Right.
tongues.
Hmm.
And you don't really ever get those. You don't really ever get the interpreter of
We
tongues.
did
You
in the
get,
church I grew up in.
oh, well, lucky you. We
Yeah.
just got tongues. Like,
Well, here was the weird thing
nobody's
for me
interpreting
was
tongues.
there was a like a 2 month period where I was faking speaking in tongues, not to be mean or rude or sacrilegious. I
No,
was just trying to hit the ground running. Like I would start it and maybe
I'm
God would take
ready.
over.
Yeah, totally.
But there were times when I did do the fake speaking tongues, like just trying to get it going. And then someone would interpret my gibberish.
Yeah.
And I'd be sitting there like, no, 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 like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not the real one. Don't
About a
interpret
Honda
that.
should about a Kia, Like, yeah,
And so, but that never made me doubt. It just made me say, I don't know what that is. I don't know how that person was able to interpret my gibberish.
a God thing.
Hey, okay. All right.
No, so I will say this. I did have one experience. It wasn't speaking in tongues.
Hmm.
But we would have this conference at our church annually, and it wasn't like a revival conference. People came, they taught it or spoke about certain topics, but at the end, of course, there's like the altar call and like the worship and like all of that. And I did have someone pray for me, and I will say this: there was one and only one time that I passed out,
Hmm.
and I very much think I passed out, not I was slain in the spirit. But at the time, that's of course
Okay.
what it appeared
Right.
to be, and like
Right.
that's what everyone thought. Can I
Hmm.
prove I wasn't slain in the spirit? No.
Hmm.
But what's more likely? I passed out.
Right.
Um,
You were tarrying at the altar.
exactly. It
Okay.
was warm. I like
Hmm.
honestly, I was extremely like anxious because
Yeah.
I wanted this so much. And
And you're
so
exerting
anyway,
yourself while you're standing there. Your hands are raised or whatever you're
oh
doing
yeah.
to,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And you have
Hmm.
people all around you and they're
Yeah.
all around you. And
Hmm.
honestly, like what I
Hmm.
didn't know until later in life is I'm prone to panic attacks. So
Hmm.
it's again, do I know it was that? No,
Right.
but like Occam's
Yeah.
razor here. Like
Right.
what's more likely?
Yeah. Wow.
Um, but I just want to put that out there for like, like transparency's sake. It was
Hmm.
the one and only time it happened. It never happened before or after. I never spoke in tongues. I never, like
Hmm.
prophesied over anyone, at least
Hmm.
not in like any really like
Yeah.
meaningful way.
Did you have
Um,
prophecy spoken over you?
Oh yeah. And I think about one pretty regularly, which is
Mm.
like so funny to me because I remember this so clearly.
Mm.
Somebody was prophesying over me, and they said to me something along the lines of like, you are going to have the ability and the reach to have to help so many people heal.
Mm.
And at the time, I thought that meant something, like I was going to bring a bunch of people to Jesus. As it turns out, I have been able to help a lot of people
Yeah.
heal, just not in the way that they meant it, I don't think.
Oh, wow.
But hey, maybe they're onto
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Wow.
But I had lots of prophecy over me, and
Mm.
like I still think about it all the time because every time, and I'm sure they said this to a lot of people, but every time I would go up and they'd all lay hands on me,
Mm.
and like at least one person would say something like, "Woo, like you have such a big calling on your life," and I'm like, "Thanks."
Now, did you have a big personality? Because I feel like sometimes people prophesy based on what they just assume about you on your personality.
Yeah, so I didn't think that I did,
Mm.
but I mean, I have a big personality now.
Mm.
That being said, I've done a lot of healing and therapy and like sort of stepped into my own.
Mm.
Whereas at that time in my life, I don't know, maybe I had a big personality. Yeah, I would say, I guess,
Mm.
or at least like they saw they saw me doing things enough times,
Mm.
as in like, oh, giving a talk or like
Gotcha.
going on a missions trip or whatever, that to
Yeah.
them it seemed,
Yeah.
I imagine it seemed like if I kept on doing those
Yeah.
things, I would fulfill what they saw as, God's
Yeah.
calling.
They never give those super sensational prophecies to the quiet and timid kid.
Yeah.
They personally can't see that in the kid, and so they can't see God seeing that in the kid. Like it's
Yeah.
amazing
Yeah.
how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's just humans.
Right. Almost.
Yeah.
Almost.
It's
If you
almost.
didn't know any better, you would think that. But
I'm going to try to turn on this light behind me.
okay.
I'm hoping it's not going to make me like, okay, that's
No, you're
better.
good.
I just
If you
didn't
guys have
want
any
it to.
questions or comments for Jessica or me, super chat them. Otherwise, be friendly in the chats. If there's any believers, Christians, or whatever, treat them kindly in the chat. And Christians treat unbelievers kindly in the chat.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So how do you get to the point where you said the questions sort of coming up and
Yeah. So, they're coming up in a variety of fashions. Some as it relates to this sort of like charismatic giftings, and
mm,
some just like theologically, I just could not get to make sense.
mm.
And of course, I was told that God knows better than we do, and
Were
God.
you heavy into reading your Bible?
Yes.
Okay.
I was heavy into reading my Bible. However, I would say that the way I read my Bible was deeply, um, I don't want to say skewed, but like I read it with a very specific lens.
Mm,
And that lens was what I was being taught or had been taught in the church. And so I
mm,
wasn't going to see things that weren't told to me.
mm,
But when it came to like broader or sort of like maybe more abstract theology, like for instance, I remember very clearly asking repeatedly, okay, so we have a God who knows everything, has always known everything, has known everything before
mm,
the foundations of the earth.
mm,
He's known every person he's ever going to create and every single thing that that person's going to do. He also then knows how many of these people are going to not choose him for whatever
mm,
reason, right? Be it place you're born,
mm,
be it they just don't believe it, like whatever the reason, right? And he knows that they're all going to go to hell because of that. Because I also grew up in a church that had a very narrow, like, if you don't fit in this,
mm,
like, hell. Um, and not only that, like, he looked and saw all of human history, all of the atrocities that were going to happen, all of the suffering that was going to take place. And he said to himself, I'm okay with that.
mm,
Like, I'm okay with that.
mm,
Make it make sense. Like, it does not make sense to me.
mm.
And of course, this would be something that I would try and go over with people over and over and over. And they tried all of these, and not over and over and over in an argumentative way, like an over and over and over, and like, please help me make sense of this because this is like eating at my brain.
Mm,
Um, and I got all the standard arguments of like free will and this
mm-hmm,
and that. I'm like, okay, God gave us free will, great.
mm-hmm,
He still knew
mm,
how many people were going to end up being tortured for
mm,
all eternity. And he still knew of all these violent, painful, like horrible
mm,
genocides and atrocities that were going to happen. And he thought
mm,
it's still worth it.
mm,
And then I sort of extrapolated on that and said,
mm,
like, okay, he thought it was still worth it because I'm being taught that it's because he was like wanted to be in relationship with humanity.
mm,
And so I thought, so all of that was worth it because like he wanted to be in relationship.
mm,
And like, and then he decided on top of all of that, that the only way
mm,
this could be like kind of fixed
mm,
is by sending his son to be tortured
mm,
to death as a blood sacrifice
mm.
when he made the rules. Like he made the rules. He didn't have, like, he could have chosen
Right,
anything.
right. Mm,
And so this was something that ate at me a lot for a long time. I
mm,
talked to so many people about it. Like, and this is not even why I left. This is just something that like
right.
these kinds of things
Wow.
were just like
Mm,
they just like racked me. So eventually,
mm, mm, mm.
as I got older, like 18 or a little bit over, I kind of left, like I didn't leave the church, but I kind of distanced myself. I
Let me
would,
just ask you for anybody who's
sure,
watching this and trying to put themselves in your shoes or whatever. When those questions were coming up, since they are not the things that actually cause you to leave the faith eventually, so when they were coming up, could you ever have thought at that time that it's like you could leave the faith? Could you ever see yourself
no.
leaving the faith? These were just questions.
They were questions, but the way they were, after kind of exhausting the person that I was talking to,
Mm,
ultimately what it would always seem to get to is one, like God can see sort of the far bigger picture than we
right.
can. God's ways are higher than ours.
Mm,
And,
mm,
you have to have faith. Like these
yeah,
are what it came down to at the
got you.
end of all these conversations. And you
Got you.
can't really argue with that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just like, okay, but also if God's ways are higher than our ways and we can't understand him, then why do y'all seem to know exactly what I should be doing at any given time? Like,
Right.
like, all right. And I wasn't like a kid who did like anything
Mm,
crazy. I didn't do
mm,
anything. I like went to school. I got good grades. I came home. I took care of my sisters because my parents were the ones being dysfunctional.
mm,
I just like,
mm,
yeah. So no, but at that time, I still thought like
mhm.
this actually, interestingly enough, does kind of feed in ultimately to how and why I left. So,
Okay.
um, basically, I distanced myself a little bit, not intentionally, but because I moved and I was just, I don't know, I was being 19 and, yada, yada. Eventually, I started dating someone. And about a year after we started dating, he uh, succumbed to suicide.
Mm,
And that put me in like a really obviously dark place. But I had been taught my whole life that like when you're at your lowest and you're
mhm,
most broken, that's when God will,
mm,
find you or be with you. That's when you really feel him.
mhm,
And, long story long, what I decided to do was go to YWAM, Youth with the Mission,
mhm,
and go on like this. They have like their discipleship training school, and then you go on a missions trip. And like missions was huge because I grew up evangelical. So I thought,
mm,
okay, I'm definitely at my lowest. Like
mm,
this is like unbearable. And but like what I'll do is I'll
mm,
show God how much
mm.
like faith I have in him to show up by like going and
Yeah.
doing this,
Mhm,
thing somewhere else.
mm,
Spoiler alert, that did not happen. I mean, I did go, but
mm.
he did not show up. um, so
Mm,
I came home a couple years later. I was pretty disillusioned, but a couple years later, I went back to undergrad when I was about 23,
mm,
and I went back to it's a small private university, but it's in the Bay Area where I'm from, and it's like very liberal and diverse. And so as I'm not like going to church all the time or anything like that, but I still sort of have these beliefs. And I still think that like, hell is real. And I still think that like the rapture could happen. And I still all think all of these things. I just kind of like don't really know how to handle all of that. But when I go to this school, I start meeting an incredibly diverse group of people. So people from different, sorry if you can hear my cat, people from different, definitely different religions or just none at all, different sexual orientations, different gender identities, like different, just everything.
Yeah,
Kitty,
the
come
world.
here. Yeah, sorry, let me grab my cat.
All good.
Come here, you bozo. So say hi, say hi.
Hey.
Yeah, of course, but she doesn't want to be with me. She just wants to meow at me. So I was really struggling with this idea that all of these people who genuinely seemed like good people and were like doing good things in the world, I mean, mostly, and like being kind and just all of this, that they were all going to go to hell for being born like who they were. Because at this point, you really couldn't tell me that somebody was, if they were identified as gay, that they weren't born that way. Like, sorry, because I would be like, okay, well, I'm straight. It turns out I'm not all the way straight, but but at that point, I thought I was.
Right.
And so I could not reconcile these things. And so I said to myself, okay, well, I know that I can't trust my emotions. I know I can't trust my heart. Like, I know all of this stuff. But what I have also been told is that, like, the Bible is 100% God's infallible word, truth, whatever. I was also of the, I mean, obviously it's been fallible, then this is like a real life account of history and it should be provable. So I thought to myself, all right, I'm going to start researching like the historical events of the Bible. Not like, we'll just let alone all of the supernatural stuff that we can't prove. That's supernatural. It's like, you just can't. And if I can find scholarly evidence for these allegedly historical points or events of the Bible, then I'm just going to like accept that these things are true, and I just have to deal with the fact that it doesn't make sense to me and that I don't really feel anything. So like, I'll just suck it up because like.
So your investigation was not to disprove the Bible, it was to prove the Bible.
Yes, it was to prove the Bible. However, I also grew up in a church that told me that, if you can find one thing wrong in the Bible, you can throw the whole thing out, which is like a terrible retention plan. Terrible. Like terrible, because even if you believe that the Bible is infallible in God's world, even if you believe that like all the supernatural things happened, you can't get past the first 2 chapters without seeing things that just don't line up. They just don't.
Well, you can if you're a certain type of believer. If you are credulous and willing to do what it takes to, I say apologetics is a form of theodicy, because you're basically trying to reconcile how an all-wise, perfect God can give you a communication that is not perfect. And so you have to justify that. And if you're the type of person who's willing to do that,
Yeah, I mean, then fine. But I think like, in my opinion, apologetics is like, it's, how do I phrase this? People use it, people like it because so long as you don't, go too far into it, it gives you a pseudo intellectual basis for your beliefs, and it makes you feel better about them. And people usually just want to feel better, to be honest, and they don't want to think too hard. And that, I mean, also lots of people I grew up with, myself, for a long time. So like, so I started this sort of investigation 100% because I was trying to prove it. I was trying to find out that, obviously, find out it's true. That's what proving it is. So that I could just sort of stop worrying about the doubts I was having or the feelings I was having. Just basically say, like, those don't matter and I don't need to pay attention to them. I'm just gonna, I know what I have to do, and it's this, right? Because knowing what you're supposed to do, even if you don't love it, is like a lot easier than not knowing what it is you're supposed to be doing.
Please, for the person that's watching, pay attention to this, because Jessica's resolve there. She was going to resign herself to, look, if I can just know that this is true, I'm going, like, despite the feelings, I'm going to just rock out, like, to resign herself over to the faith. Let me read the super chat real quick from Marissa
Oh,
Nato.
yeah.
Thank you for the $5 super chat. It says, I completely relate. I could no longer rationalize the BS. Deconstruction is a long process of doubting your doubts until you just give up the ghost.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Amen.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Amen.
Yes, thank you for
Yeah.
that.
I mean, my deconstruction process, I tell people all the time, was not this overnight. Some people can, and like I love that for them.
Mhm.
One day they just decide they're not really about that life anymore, and they peace out, and they
Mm.
never really think about it again. And honestly, I love that if that's what happens. For
Yeah.
me, it was, I mean, you pretty much had to pull me away from this, kicking and screaming, because, excuse me, because when I realized, when I started to realize there's these incongruities and it's not like it's not working out. I remember sitting in one of my classes one day. I should have been paying attention, but I was thinking about this. And I thought to myself, like in this moment, okay, if this is not true, this is what I have based my entire understanding of the world around. What is true? What do I know? Like, what are my values if they're not based on this? Like, it felt unmoored in a lot of ways, because all of a sudden I'm floating out here in the ether trying to figure out what can I actually be sure of,
Yeah.
and what do I like, how do I move forward from here? Yeah.
So wait, the class that you were sitting in was unrelated to this. It
Yeah, it was
wasn't
French.
you're
Yeah, it was
sitting in a
just
French
French.
class
Yeah.
and you're thinking about your faith. And I know that I was actually I was in seminary when my faith began to erode.
Oof,
But
yeah.
I remember sitting there and it felt like the floor had just moved out from under me. And I just
Mhm.
was falling through, like, the way, like you said, unmoored. Nietzsche talks about this when he talks about um, the madman coming saying, we've killed God. He says, we've unchained ourselves from the sun. And he says,
Yeah.
aren't we now just moving forward, backwards, and side to side? Like, we don't have, our sense of gravity is lost now. That's how I
Yeah.
felt when I
Oh
felt
yeah.
my faith coming apart. So
Yeah.
you do an investigation. You say, let me just see if I can prove this thing. How does that
Right.
lead to you peace
Yeah.
out?
So I mean, once I started, and again, it was a slower process, but once I started realizing that, like, not only is there not good evidence for pretty much, I won't say anything, for most things, um like there's actually evidence, like a lot of evidence that goes
Against it.
against it.
Right.
And what something I found really interesting and sort of like just like a smack in the face was that, like, lots of the scholars that were arguing this identified as Christian. Like, not all of them,
Right.
obviously, but like they were okay having their
Yeah.
spiritual beliefs or like religious beliefs and then having good academic like process,
Yeah.
and they were separate things for them, and they could do that. So over time, as I read more and more and more, it's like you lose things a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
Well, I was no longer like practicing or going to church. Like I would say, like, I realized that a lot of my sort of relationship, I guess, to religion or to the church, because of the very specific brand of Christianity I grew up in, was deeply, deeply rooted in fear. And they effectively scared you into like tying yourself into pretzels to make sense of things that didn't make sense,
Yeah.
because you were so afraid of this potential. It's like when every little thing you do has an eternal consequence, like it's so hard to break free from that, because like it's not just like, okay, well, if I make this choice, I don't know, I don't get a chance to go here, or if I make this choice, like I lose that. It's like every choice you make has this consequence of potentially sending you to hell. And like, what could be worse than spending eternity in hell?
Well, and
So
for the Christian who's watching thinking, well, I don't think everything is going to put me out. You, at least, Christian, still have to worry about losing eternal reward. So maybe you're not going to be in hell, but she's still saying there's an eternal consequence for everything, even if it's
Yeah.
just the loss of reward. So you still have to factor in, like, this applies to even what you believe now.
Yeah, especially if you're the kind of Christian who believes that like you're gonna get like jewels in your crown, and then you get crowns, you gotta throw them at the feet of Jesus,
Right.
and you don't want to be like that one janky Christian who has like no crowns, or like
With
a crown but
stones in
like
your
no
crown.
jewels. Yeah, they're like empty, and you're like, ooh, sorry. Um, like so like
Yeah.
it still has eternal consequences, and
Hmm.
I think like another way this was really clear for me growing up was that I was taught,
Mm.
and I don't actually even think this is like really biblical, but like I was taught that if you have the opportunity to sort of like tell someone about Jesus or witness, here on earth, and you don't do it, and that person ultimately ends up going to hell, like their
Their
blood is
blood is
on
going to be
your
on your
hands.
hands.
Yeah, and so it also
Yeah.
like really
Yeah.
really makes it hard to form genuine relationships with other people, or
Yeah.
other non-Christians, I should
Mm.
say, because you have an
Mm.
agenda,
Yeah.
and you feel like you have to have that agenda,
Yeah.
because otherwise, like it's going to have an eternal consequence
Yeah.
for them and for you.
Yeah.
Like so,
Mm.
yeah. So again, like it's yeah.
Yeah.
So over time,
Mm.
things would fall away and or like sort of dissolve in pieces.
Mm.
The more I learned, the less these beliefs had like a hold over me. Go ahead, sorry.
One question about that. As you're seeing that some of the Christian or some of the scholars who are making these observations about the incongruity of this passage of scripture with this passage of scripture, or the non-historicity of this idea in the Bible, and you're seeing that some of these scholars are actually Christians who are willing to admit these things but still hold their faith, did you think to yourself, if this is true, then I can't believe this? Or did you think, maybe I'll be like one of them? I can have a more loose, like, did you see yourself being that kind of Christian?
No.
Get
And I
it.
say
I get it.
okay, so I will admit to this. So
Mm.
I am one autistic.
Mm.
So I don't have a lot of gray in my brain, and I never have.
Mm.
Um, I've always been someone who's kind of all in on something,
Mm-hmm.
and if not, then I'm all out. Like
Yeah.
I don't. But secondly, I was spent 15, 16 years of my life in a religion that also didn't allow for that.
Mm.
Like if you were lukewarm, he was going to
Yeah.
spit you out of his mouth. So there
Yeah.
was no gray area allowed. And when you
Yeah.
do that, like when someone with a brain like mine is in a
Mm.
space like that for
Mm.
so long,
Yeah.
it's really hard to ever
Mm-hmm.
to
Sure.
even imagine what it would look like
Yeah.
to have a faith
Yeah.
that's like that's not
It's
all in.
wishy-washy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, wishy-washy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do know a lot of people that do have these more like relaxed faiths, and they
Mm.
seem to work for them, and I'm
Mm.
happy for them. I don't
Mm.
have a problem with it.
Yeah.
So long as they're not like being bigots or weirdos.
Mm.
Um, but it like I, I just couldn't.
Gotcha.
And we can, for whatever
Yeah.
reason that is, I just couldn't.
Yeah.
Um, I'll say that the like last thing I think probably to like go over a several year period
Mm.
um was hell.
Mm.
Um because like I had for a long time been really scared of the rapture. When I realized that the rapture wasn't a theological concept until like the 1800s,
Mm.
I was like, well, okay, I guess that's like fine. I guess that's like not a thing. Um that being said, that didn't necessarily
Mm.
like remove the idea that Jesus would come back, the thief in
Mm-hmm.
the night, and
Mm-hmm.
like it's like set up his kingdom on earth. And there's still be all of this stuff going on. It just was not going to be this like rapture idea.
Mm.
So, but that did remove a lot of the anxiety I had around the rapture.
Mm.
Hell
Wow.
was like many, many steps
Okay.
beyond and later, because it's a much more foundational
Yeah.
doctrine
Yeah.
than the rapture is.
Now, had you been praying all that time? Like, what was your prayer life like as you're deconstructing? But because you don't even think you're deconstructing, you're trying to prove this thing to be true, but you're finding out that you can't prove that, you can't prove that.
Yeah.
Did you like pray,
Yeah.
like, God help me, I'm searching, I'm seeking?
Well, I had prayed that way for so long,
Mm.
for so long. that by the time I got to this point where I was like, I'm going to investigate, see what I can find,
Mm-hmm.
and like, I'm whatever the evidence shows me, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to let that dictate the way that I go, like move forward.
Yeah.
So I would say in the earlier points or the earlier like parts, I was still praying and
Mm.
asking like, okay, if it's here, like help me find it, right? If I can.
Mm.
But shortly after I started getting into just even like
Mm.
not even the book of Joshua, just like Joshua, right? Well, like kind of the book of Joshua, but just like the stories
Mm.
of marching around Canaan,
Mm.
the walls have come tumbling down, and then you look at the archaeological evidence and like
Mm.
it's just not there.
Mm.
And we have archaeological evidence from like that time period and far beyond, and we
Mm.
know what we're looking for when it
Mm.
comes to these foundational like layers and walls.
Right.
Like it's just not there. The other thing that was big for me was that I grew up a young earth creationist. So
Mm.
the earth is 6,000 years old.
Mm.
Okay, like if you like the Mesopotamians have been around for way longer than that. So like this idea is just like
Mm.
you can only believe that if you like are so insulated in your own community
Yeah.
that you don't get
Right.
that earlier history, because that's not even like nobody, that's not a question,
Yeah.
like that's not like a debatable topic. They
Mm.
existed
Right.
for a long time.
Mm.
So this idea that like the earth is 6,000 years old, it's laughable
Mm.
when you look at recorded history. And like so I mean, like, as things started falling apart really quickly in
Mm.
a lot of ways, not in all the ways, because a
Mm.
lot of like those things, like I said, had sort of it traumatized me in a lot of ways because you're thinking about hell all the time, right?
Mm.
Um, and so that's when things started to, sorry, to your question, in the beginning, yes, I did pray, but as things started to become like this, like sort of snowball effect of going downhill, like things that like that I was finding that weren't true, that you couldn't
Mm.
like prove, um, the prayer kind of,
Yeah. Trailed off.
because it's like,
Mm.
what's the point? I wasn't
Mm.
getting any answers before,
Mm.
and like now that I've set out to do this thing, and I did pray at the beginning and told God, like, listen, like if
Mm.
you're like, I really need some help here. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. So hell was the last thing. How did you get over that one?
So let me say this: hell is basically the last thing. I think that purity culture
Mm.
probably has had the farthest reaching effect, because I think,
Mm.
especially as women, you'll be constantly
Yeah.
women having grown up not only in purity culture but also just in this society
Mm-hmm.
like have to constantly undo things that we're taught about our bodies or our looks or like
Mm.
just everything.
Your
So I think,
role and all that. Yeah.
right, exactly. I think maybe purity culture has like the longest lasting
Mm-hmm.
effects, but purity culture was never going to keep me in the church, right? That
Gotcha.
was like a sort of like a
Mm.
part of being in the church.
Mm-hmm.
So hell was definitely like the last major thing to finally like stop causing me anxiety, and that was
Mm.
years into my process.
Mm.
And the way that I
Mm.
sort of let go of that again in pieces was by learning about what the Old Testament has to say about hell, or lack
Or didn't
thereof,
say, right?
or didn't say. And then like the
Mm.
evolution, not just of like the
Mm.
evolution of sort of Jewish
Yeah.
theology over time,
Yeah.
or like the apocalyptic worldview over time. And you can see it develop and how
Mm.
it goes from nothing. It doesn't say anything. There's nothing, right?
Mm.
The earliest thing I think you get is this like Sheol, which is just like the pit,
Mm-hmm.
which like how you take the pit and go to
Right.
hell and not a grave
Mm.
is like,
Yeah.
okay. Also, what's like really fun for me now is that people that never have taken a lick of Hebrew in their life think that they can like clearly interpret Hebrew.
Mm.
People that study Hebrew for a living
Mm.
aren't even always able to
Right.
clearly interpret ancient Hebrew. What they're just
Right.
not. But I started learning about that, and like I had done it sort of piecemeal. I think if anyone is looking for a useful, like, sort of where it's all easily accessible, Bart Ehrman's Heaven and Hell book
Yep.
was really
Excellent.
great.
Excellent. Yeah.
That came out very, very long
Mm-hmm.
after my process, but like, it's an accessible, easy to
Yep.
read, well researched,
Yep. Great.
like, clear book. So,
Great
but yeah,
resource.
effectively his book in piecemeal
Mm-hmm.
was how I realized that, like, yeah,
You don't need to worry
this is
about
not
hell.
something that, like, this is just not something. And then even when we get to like Jesus's day,
Mm,
there's like competing theologies about the afterlife. Like,
right.
some people don't believe in it, some people do believe in it, but they're not sure
Mm,
what it looks like. Some people think that, like, you're, people aren't going to go to hell, they're just going to get annihilated,
mm,
which is like what they consider to still be like pretty bad, but it's not like
mm,
this eternal suffering.
right.
Like, and so it was like, well, I'm pretty sure that if hell was as big of a deal as everybody like told me that it was,
Mm.
um, like ancient people would have known about it, or at least like would have been warned or told about it.
Mm,
And it's just not, they're just not.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you know you're out?
I mean, I knew I was out. I'd say probably like, I don't know, like a year after I started this. And maybe
Mm,
even sooner,
wow.
but I would say, but like, but the like wild part is that even though I knew I was like, yeah, I'm done.
Mm,
It still took me several years after to get
mm-hmm.
rid of this like nagging anxiety and
Yes.
fear, even
Yes.
though I was like, I don't believe this anymore. And to be fair, because I did the Pell research piecemeal, that it took a lot sort of longer
Yeah.
because there was lots of different things that I had to read and think about in order to
Mm-hmm.
get to this end um, result. But yeah, I would say, probably a little less than a year.
Mm,
And then, like the stuff that was just like the indoctrination, I had to undo.
yeah.
You have to undo slowly. Um, but yeah.
Yeah. Um, Prophet of Zod has a video he just put out today. The video is called "Do Christians Tell Fake Deconstruction Stories?" It's a great video. He's actually critiquing a Christian who told a story of when they were doubting their faith and deconstructed, and Prophet of Zod just kind of goes through it and a few points. I don't want to spoil it, but you guys can go check it out. Do Christians tell fake deconstruction stories? He makes the point that, and I just thought this was so interesting because it caused me to put a magnifying glass on my process. The Christian he's critiquing in this video, he says, the Christian says, I started this deconstruction process, but I was committed to my faith. I just wanted to make sure that I was able to get rid of the bad parts of it. And Prophet of Zod stops it and says, it's not really a deconstruction process if you're already committed to a certain outcome.
Yeah.
If you know where this thing is going to end up, you're not really deconstructing. You're
Right.
rearranging furniture. You're maybe getting rid of some pieces, but you're not really deconstructing.
Yeah.
Deconstruction is open-ended, and you're gonna, it's wherever this thing ends up, that's where I'm gonna end up, but I'm gonna go through this process.
Yeah. I agree. And that's, I think if Christians are watching this and they think to themselves, there's some like things about my theology that don't sit right with me, you should explore those. You don't
Mm,
necessarily have to leave the faith at the end of it.
mm,
This is something I would say to people all the time. I'm not here to tell you what to think.
mm,
I am here to give you tools to better think
mm,
about your process, your journey, whatever. And wherever you end up is up to you. If I sat here and told you where you have to end up, I'd be no better than the church that I left, right? So,
yeah.
I think that these things, that some people call deconstruction, I'm like, I
Mm,
don't know what, like, the term encompasses so many things. Who
mm-hmm,
am I to say like what falls under that? But I do think that like there are Christians who have deconstruct and then reconstruct,
mm-hmm,
um, which I think is really interesting
mm-hmm.
because all this deconstruction talk is like a la Derrida, and I like, the thing about deconstructing is you can deconstruct so far, but at some point you have to reconstruct.
Mm.
Like I had to reconstruct. I didn't reconstruct a religion or
Mm.
a faith like
Right.
tradition, but I did have to reconstruct my values
Yeah.
and my sort of way of interacting with the world and my
Yeah.
worldview.
Your
And
epistemology, all of that.
yes, you
Yeah.
have to rebuild after
Mm-hmm.
you tear it all down. And for some people, that rebuilding is a modified faith.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's atheism, right? And it's a whole continuum.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. So like it's weird because this term deconstruction has come to encompass so many things.
Mm.
And I think that's fine, but it also allows for so many people
Mm.
to use this term that
Yeah.
has very clear, especially at this point, like connotations, and it's a loaded word
Yeah.
now because it's been latched onto and sort of, you know, demonized.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that stood out to me because you use the term you have to deconstruct after you tear it all down. But I think what Prophet Azad was getting at is you haven't really torn it all down if you're committed to the house standing at the end of the process.
Oh, sure.
You
No,
know what
I
I
agree
mean?
with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think that again, I just get like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I agree with that. If you're committed to an outcome,
Yeah.
then like you're not really like,
Well, help me with this because I want to go to your current education
oh
after
yeah,
this. Help me with this. Um, so when I heard Prophet Azad say that, I had to question myself because I said, well, if being committed to an outcome means you're not really deconstructing because it has to be open-ended. The result has to be open-ended. I said, well, I don't know because for me, I did the opposite of what you did, Jessica. I was not trying to prove the Bible. I was committed to a different outcome. I said, let me see if I can disprove it. I was committed to tearing it all down. And I said, I'm going to let that be, I'm going to shoot for that outcome to see if it's possible because my background, sort of like yours, but not so long in the Pentecostal. I got to the, I guess the Baptist and Reformed Baptist and all that. Um, but it still was this sense of there is no wiggle room. There's no in between.
yeah,
And so I said, I need to see whether or not I can totally deconstruct this thing. And I knew that if I was not committed to that kind of an outcome, I was going to allow the apologetics to play a certain role. And so I sort of I had to overcommit to tearing it down just to even get myself to that point to see if it was possible. And then when I saw how easy it was, like you, I couldn't even get through the first couple of chapters of Genesis. I said, damn, is it that easy to deconstruct this thing?
yeah,
And I said, uh-oh, it's over.
yeah,
I'm going to keep
yeah,
going, but I kind of knew at that point it's over.
yeah. I mean, again, like this is why I struggle to make any broad value statements as it pertains to the term deconstruction or the
Mm,
deconstruction community or whatever, because again, deconstruction is a very general term. It's not like we have some manifesto
right.
where, you know, we give it to people and if you don't check off all of these things, then you
Right.
haven't really deconstructed, right? It's
Right.
a word that sort of came into being organically.
Yeah.
And when so many different things can fall under it, then who am I to really say what deconstruction is
Right.
or isn't? Um, I don't think that having a commitment to your faith and then using the term deconstruction in the way that
Yeah.
those people are using it, I think that's disingenuous
Yeah.
because what you probably did was think you like this is my other problem with all
Mm,
of this. I think deconstruction and all of this stuff on the internet is really important and really valuable and like
mm-hmm.
helps a lot of people. But also it's given people like this way of having some kind of like, you know, online what's the word I'm looking for? Clout that they
Mm,
wouldn't otherwise have because it's
mm,
really easy as a Christian
right.
to like to be if you want to be disingenuous to say like, oh, I deconstructed. It's
Yeah.
like when people say, oh, I used to be an atheist. Like,
Mm,
no, you just weren't religious.
right.
There's a difference between those two things,
Yeah.
right? Like maybe you were agnostic, sure, but you weren't an
Mm,
atheist.
right.
But people like to use that because it is a way for them to sort of posture
Yeah.
or like build up their own side of the argument in a way they think like knocks the other side down a few pegs without really ever having to do anything.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
So
And Prophet
yeah.
Azad makes some of those same points. Everything from not trying to be a gatekeeper of what deconstruction is
Oh, sure. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah.
to the way that people use the term deconstruction to sort of get that
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
clout that you talk
Well,
about.
and this is not meant like I haven't watched his video.
Yeah.
This is not meant to like a
Mm-hmm.
critique of him. I just
Right.
feel like
Yep.
I don't know. I just feel like I have to sort of say those things
Yep. All
because
good.
yeah.
All right. So then last thing, then let's move to this. You are now, so you deconvert. That was, how long ago was that you finally?
At this point, probably like 10 years.
10 years. And God
Sorry.
never get, that's all good. You got 2 cats, right?
I have 2 cats. This one up here is not the one meowing.
Okay.
The other one is, but she won't come over here. Sorry.
Okay. All good. I'm thinking back to when you were on Facebook talking about how they won't come out from under the bed. So now they just,
I know, and
they
now
rule
they're
the
like,
house.
won't leave me alone. Yeah, no, they've definitely come a long way.
All good. What was I going to say? So
you were
10
saying
years,
yeah,
10 years out. God never came calling. God never called you back. God never wooed you back. Did you ever like miss it? Did you ever have the sense of, I know for me,
no,
one of the things that continues to like, not that I have these moments where I'm like, I miss it or anything like that. It's just proof that I made the right decision because I'm like, here I am, years out of the faith. And if there was a God, if this was true, you would think there would be some sort of leaving the 99 to come get the one. You've been out for 10 years.
Yeah, I'm
There's
ready,
never
bestie.
been, there's no mission for your soul from the hound of heaven
Not,
is not chasing you down.
yeah, no,
So,
not so far as I can tell.
okay.
I like, and I've said this to like my parents when they have over the years tried to find ways to talk to me about God or the faith or bring me back. And I just told them flat out, if your God is as powerful as you say he is, and he loves me as much as you say he does, he'll find a way to reach me that's not you. Because all you're doing is pissing me off.
Wow.
Like, you're not bringing me any closer. In fact, you're pushing me further away. So like,
yeah.
And so, yeah.
So
but no, I haven't noticed anything.
Got you. So before TikTok, you were just living your life without God. You weren't thinking about God or thinking about helping other people deconstruct or anything like that.
So I wasn't thinking about helping other people deconstruct. I didn't even know people were deconstructing. When I left, nobody was like really cared and like nobody was talking about it. I called it like a deconversion just because that was like the best way that I could think of if somebody asked me, which like people were not asking me very frequently, but if they did ask me, that was sort of the term I used. So I wasn't thinking about God in the way that, like in a religious sense, but as I had done all of this reading and research, I found that like I enjoyed it. And so reading this like different kinds of scholarship on the ancient world had become somewhat of like a pet project, but I wasn't doing anything with it. It was just, I had like an abnormal number of books on like like ancient history, the ancient world, like ancient Israelites, like far more than your average person. But again, like I wasn't talking to anyone about it. Like it was just like a random interest of mine.
So you were not like the vocal atheist.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a good question that we probably should cover. Did you go right into atheism, or was it some sort of like deism or agnosticism? What did you?
I mean, honestly, like I pretty quickly after that just identified as agnostic if and when I needed to give a like a description. It didn't come up that much, but like when it did, I would just say agnostic. Like I can't say there is or there isn't. To be honest, like I never much gave myself the title of atheist ever, but I would say that like I think the term agnostic atheist is probably most closely aligned with me. I definitely didn't really like explore other religions. None of them really appealed to me. I like to meditate, if that's I don't know if that's religious, but that just helps me like.
Could you define the term agnostic atheist for somebody who might think, oh, maybe I can try that?
Sure. So agnostic is basically saying I can't prove that there is a God. I can't prove that there isn't a God. Atheist tends to say, but I like agnostic atheist is like I can't say if there is or there isn't, but I don't think there is
Okay.
effectively. And it's not that like, it's basically saying I don't know, but this is what I think.
Mm,
Because I'm anyway,
mm,
not in the business of making truth claims that I
mm.
can't back up, and that kind of goes both ways.
Okay. All right. So finally to the the title that I advertised this as.
Oh yeah, sorry,
So,
friends.
no. This is great stuff, and I'm sure that very many people will be being helped just by the way that you're addressing these things. Um, so you recently enrolled in a master's program,
Yes.
and what will the degree be in?
Technically, it's called a Master's in Religious Studies,
Okay.
and it's here at the good old University of Chicago's Divinity School.
Okay.
What I will say about that is the Divinity School here. I know when people hear that, they think like, oh, religion, and like
I
we
thought you were
do,
in seminary. I don't
obviously.
know why, but go ahead.
No. I mean, it makes sense when you hear Div School.
Right.
There are a few institutions, maybe more than a few, but at least a few institutions that function more as like standalone religious studies programs
Mm,
where you can approach the study of religion from a number of different perspectives. They do offer an MDiv, so you can take that track, but they also offer just a straight MA, and it's not with any I'd say that it's not with a specific religious bent, but you
mm,
can structure your curriculum in such a way that it like skews heavily in one direction or
mm.
the other, right?
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's an MA in religious studies, but really, I don't study a lot of like religion in the way that we think of it.
Mm,
I study some religion in the ancient world, but the way they thought of religion was vastly different than the way we think of religion. And I
mm,
study it not from a theological standpoint, but from a historical standpoint,
mm,
in the ways and from like a textual standpoint, and
mm,
from a philological standpoint. So
mm.
a very much uh, I guess, a secular
Right.
approach to religion.
Now, because it is a divinity school, are many of your classmates, are they actually planning to be ministers or like,
So some of them, yes. A lot of them are planning to either be rabbis or go into rabbinic studies.
mm,
Some want to be chaplains. Some
mm,
do want to be pastors. Some,
mm,
I'm trying to think what else there is. I don't know. I mean, we also offer like Hindu studies and all
mm,
that stuff, and Buddhist studies. So what I will say I've noticed is that the vast majority of Christians that I encounter at the Div school are are approach the text with far less of an a priori commitment to their
mm,
own faith belief.
mm.
Because if you're going to come here, you're going to have a really hard
Yeah.
time because like nobody, well, not nobody, most of the professors are not here to cater to your specific religious
Mm,
belief system. And if
yeah.
you want to do that, you can go to a seminary that's
Right.
in your
Denomination.
faith tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, while we definitely have, we
Mm,
have Christian theology classes you can take, and like, it's, um, it's not the, it's not the mission of the school, you know?
yeah. Um, so that question was sort of a way to get to this question. I would imagine not very many of your classmates are there for the reason that you're there.
Um, yeah. So
And why are you there?
yeah, okay. So yeah. So I would say no, not very many people are.
Mhm,
However, I'm not sure that very many people in the entire school, like writ large,
mm,
are there for the reasons I'm there.
mm,
So I functionally what I study is like the ways in which, how do I say this? I study like ancient Mesopotamia and the ways in which the Hebrew Bible sort of fits into that. And
mhm,
that's a lot more about where these two things overlap,
mhm,
and how usually how ancient Mesopotamia informs the things that
mm,
we see in the Bible, the stories we see in the Bible, the theologies we see in the Bible, the polemics we see in the Bible.
mm,
And I would say that most people, even the people that study Hebrew Bible, aren't as interested in its Mesopotamian context as I am.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of occupy a relatively niche space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not like other people do too. I mean, my advisor Jeffrey Stackert, he's like a well known Hebrew Bible scholar, but like inside he's also an Assyriologist.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you talk to him, he knows so much about the ancient world, and a lot of his work focuses on that. So I make the joke that we're kind of each other inverse, because I like obviously he knows way more than me, but like
Mm.
I very much like studying ancient Mesopotamia and seeing how that affected the Hebrew Bible, whereas he very much is this Hebrew Bible person that also writes about the ways in which like ancient
Okay.
Mesopotamia affected it. So
So you don't believe the Bible is divine? You don't believe that it gives us human history aside from the revisionist history that's in there? Um,
yeah. So sorry,
well, the
you
question is
can
going to be
finish.
if you're not taking it the way that you took it in your evangelical days, why is it still of such interest to you that you would go and study it to the degree that you're studying it?
Yeah. Well,
Because the old Christian me would say, this is proof that God still has a hold on you. Because why would you be spending your money and your time?
and I would say you don't sound very smart. No, I'm just kidding. No, I wouldn't say that. Yeah, old me would say that too.
Mm.
And like, if that's the way people want to think about it, I mean, I
Or
can't really
or
stop them.
Satan's using you because you're only going to get that education to go and do something anti-Christ with it.
Hell yeah,
Okay.
brother. Um, my sister's about to have a baby. Well, she's in September, she's gonna have a baby, and I'm gonna
Mm.
be anti-Christ, you know? Um, so yeah, I mean, so both of those arguments are just not
Mm.
like they're not rooted in anything anyone can prove. And
Mm.
so like if that's the way people want to view like why I do what I do, then
Mm.
that's that there's not really much I can say,
Okay.
because those arguments are both based on some invisible being
Mm.
having some invisible effect on my life. Um, how can I argue with that? Like I can't. So if you want to believe that,
Right.
that's kind of why I always do this jokey thing where it's like when people are like, "Oh, you're being used by the devil," I'm like, "Yeah," not because I really think I'm being used by the
Right.
devil, but because like, what do you want me to say to that? Like,
Right.
this is like, sorry, like,
Okay.
um,
Good stuff. But yeah,
now,
why? Yeah.
yeah. So I know a lot of people, and I don't blame them when they leave religion,
Mm.
they kind of just want to toss the Bible out, right?
Mm.
And that's fair. I'm not here to tell anyone they shouldn't do that. When I look at the Bible now, and it took me a long time to get here, but when I look at the Bible now, I look at it and think about all of the things that it like can teach me, not about like how to live a good life or
Mm.
like what the divine plan or like any of those things, but about the ways in which people at different points in history
Mm.
thought of themselves,
Mm.
or the way they created their own identities, or sort of the way that they responded to empire, or the way they
Mm.
responded to other belief systems. And I think there's a ton that we can like, I don't think people are that different now and then, so I think
Mm.
there's a ton
Right.
that we can learn about history, not from reading the Bible and saying like, okay, this happened then,
Mm.
because like I mean, one of the first things you'll learn, at least in this program, is that so many of the texts, I mean, like Genesis, for instance, that we think was like, or that we thought, was written like so early, it's
Mm.
actually written quite late.
Mm.
And it's written, I mean, and then you have all the different sources for it, and then you see that it's sort of like written to create this like mythic history of a people, like, but it's writing from like far later than these
Mm.
events were allegedly taking place, right?
Mm.
So why would people do that? What
Right.
purpose did that serve? What was happening when they did that? Like things like this, where I believe it's Heisinger who talks about the different ways that we can, what is history, and we
Mm.
have this idea where we we look at ancient people, and not just Hebrew Bible, just like we look at ancient people and we say, okay, well, they're writing these events that can't possibly be true, like Greek mythology, for instance,
Mm.
writing about these things that like can't possibly be true. Um, so that's not good history. Now, I don't disagree with you. However, to those people,
Mm.
their understanding of what history was
Mm.
is different than our understanding of what history is, right? History, as Heisinger says, is a people telling themselves about themselves.
Mm.
And so while we won't do history in the same way as
Right.
them, we can learn a lot from the
Yeah.
ways in which they constructed their own histories,
Mm.
right? And so, like, I
Hmm.
think people are interesting. I think history is interesting. And
Yeah.
I think for me, and it's not going to be for everybody, like I have developed a far different relationship with biblical text now that has nothing to do
Right.
with like personal religion or
Mm-hmm.
even with being like one book. Like I look
Yeah.
at the 66 books of the larger book, the Bible,
Mm.
and I effectively am treating them as ancient writings, which they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can approach it from like a billion different lenses,
Yeah.
right? Like what can we find that like is a kernel of history in here? Okay,
Mm.
how can we situate this? Like how do we do like textual criticism?
Mm-hmm.
How do we do all of these things to extrapolate on this limited corpus or to see how what we know about the broader like culture and context may
Mm.
have affected these writings? And you can do that with
Yeah.
anything, right?
Yeah. Great stuff.
It just so happens like this is what I'm
Yeah.
interested in,
Yeah.
but
That's
definitely not as like a guide to life here.
no, that's excellent. I was thinking as you were saying this, I love um to me what you're talking about here is sociology. You're talking about social engineering,
Yeah,
and being able to see it from an ancient perspective. And then, like you said, because we're not so different today. And so if you
yeah,
could understand why would a people tell their story this way? What are they trying to say to themselves about themselves or to themselves about the surrounding nations? Um, you're reading an ancient newspaper, but you have to, the different parts of the news.
yeah,
There's the reporting, and then there's the editorial, right? And so
yeah,
you're not reading ancient reporting, you're reading ancient editorialism. And as
yeah,
long as you know that this is an editorial, you take it a different way. Um, yeah.
yeah. And I think again, like not everybody has to do what I do, and I've never said that, but
Mm-hmm.
I do think like I think there's this tendency often to throw baby out with the bathwater.
Mm.
And again, if that's what you want to do or need to do, okay. Like I'm not here to tell you, no, you really need to study the Bible. Like I don't
Mm.
think that.
Mm.
I just think that like this little niche was something that really just drew me in and
Mm-hmm.
I really liked it. And like, why does anybody study any part of history they like, right? It's because
Mm.
it grabs them, it does
Yeah.
something to them, they like it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the times, like it is dovetailed very nicely with the other stuff that I do and the other
Mm.
work that I do and like talking about deconstruction and sort of offering people information. But like largely I just ended up being a history nerd.
Mm.
And the thing is that I it's too easy for us to all think about history as just stuff that happened, right? Like if you
Right.
were thinking about like the like chronicles, like not the book in the Bible, but like chronicles of something or like the annals, sorry. Then yeah, you have like this happened, this happened, this happened,
Mm.
this happened. Like, okay, okay, that's fine. But like history is so much richer
Mm.
than just line after line of what happened.
Right.
Um, and you learn so much more when you do this sort of like sleuthing into the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just the area that grabbed me.
So then you just brought up something we can, uh, I guess, kind of bring it to a close on this. What do you intend to do with your education? Like, are you just going to be a more robust TikTok
Rule the
star or,
world. No.
right?
Um, I don't, it's a great question. I'm not
Mm.
100% sure. So I think I would like to do a PhD after my
Okay.
master's. So I want to continue what I'm doing to a higher extent.
Mm.
That being said, traditionally, if you do a PhD, you're like going to get a professorship. That's
Mm.
not really the case anymore necessarily. The field for like biblical scholars and even the humanities is like
Mm.
the field, like the job market is pretty rough. I
Mm.
don't know what it'll look like when I'm done with the PhD. I'm not depending on it having a job for me. If that so happens, great. I would love to teach. I wish that I had had access to someone like the people I have access to now, or even to someone like myself when I was younger and like had these questions and was looking for whatever. So getting to teach would be awesome. Again, not like I don't whatever. I do definitely want to continue to do more public facing scholarships so I can do, like I think you guys know Dan McClellan.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that he does, I really like because I think biblical and like religious literacy is really important for a lot of reasons that aren't just deconstruction, given the country we live in and the people we live in it with.
And the time that we're in, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, I would like to do more research. I would like to write books.
Oh, wow.
So
what would you write on?
Who knows? I don't know yet.
Okay, gotcha.
Probably, but like definitely books like 5 people would read, because I would be writing about like right now I'm working on a paper that's just about like a random grammatical construction in Second Isaiah and how that like tells us about something else. Like,
so you'll be writing one of those books that cost like $96 and it'll only
that
be in hardcover.
Gotcha. Yeah, the no revised, but it's fine. I mean, and hopefully I'll also write. I would like to write more popular level books, like Dr. Josh, his books, which like are backed by incredible scholarship, but he makes it accessible and understandable to the layperson, which is a really hard task.
Yeah, for sure.
When you live deep in the weeds, it's a really hard task. So I mean, I would even like to potentially do some stuff like that.
Okay. Last question.
Okay.
I saw when you were just getting ready to start your program, you sort of kind of had like this little like, I can't wait to get there and be a troublemaker. Like, I guess I'm curious, troublemaker in what sense and what's changed? Because I feel like now what you post is not so much troublemaking, but like, this is how my mind is being expanded in this program.
Yeah. So to be fair, I don't have a lot of time to post generally. So like I do post, but like, it is whatever I have on my mind at that moment. I would say that I've definitely had some like fun encounters with people, evangelicals. There's not a huge amount of them here. I was really hoping there'd be more, but so there's not a huge amount. That's why we don't see more posts about that. Yeah, like I'm looking for trouble. I just can't find it. So I
was looking forward to those posts. I'm like, how come we haven't gotten them? Okay.
Yeah, no, it's because like I know, gosh darn it, like everybody here is so much more open-minded than I anticipated. But with some people who, want to talk to me about Messianic Judaism, which I'm like, no. Or, like different evangelical leaders that I happen to know are like not great. And so I can tell that people don't really love me letting them know that. But again, these are few and far between, because most people here that came to a program that's quite academically rigorous kind of self-select, I think. And I will also say that given the classes I take right now, I really only bounce back and forth between a couple of teachers, all of whom more or less like align with what I think or how I think. So I just haven't got a chance to cause that much trouble.
All right. Well, stay tuned to Jessica. Is it Heathen Queen on TikTok?
Queen of the Heathens.
Queen of the Heathens on TikTok.
Yeah.
Jessica HQ on Facebook.
Whoop.
Are you active on Instagram as well?
I am. I'm Queen of Heathens over there, but the O and of is a 0.
All right. Stay tuned, because if she does find more trouble, hopefully she's going to post about it and we'll get the follow.
I will.
What's the biggest thing that you've learned just in this first semester or first year since you've been there? Like what's blown your mind or changed your perspective the most?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Or what's humbled you the most? I'll take anything, whatever you got.
Oh, I mean, what's humbled me the most, definitely like learning Hebrew. Good Lord, or ancient Hebrew, I'll say, because one, we're on a quarter system, so you get 2 quarters of grammar and then you're straight into the text course, and that's a wild ride. Something that like I just hadn't seen before when I was reading the Bible, like in the faith or out of the faith, that I found really interesting was that when you look at a lot of points, especially in like the Old Testament and in the Pentateuch, um, and like if you read it, they're right there. You just like you don't see it, is how often God like learns things he didn't know about his creation and
Right.
then like adjusts.
Yeah.
Or like the ways in which he needs to be reminded so he doesn't do like he doesn't either does do things or doesn't do things. And also like just how much overlap, um not not plagiarism,
Yeah.
but like the different ideas and structures and whatever from nations around Israel, how they show up
The shared
in
cultural
actually
milieu.
quite sophisticated ways in the Hebrew Bible. But yeah, and also like you
Yeah.
said, this shared cultural sort of milieu. And I think you know when you leave religion or fundamentalism, the tendency is kind of to swing into like the Hebrew Bible plagiarized everything. And like it didn't. And again, you don't have to study it in the way I do, but like I think that's maybe the number one thing is I've learned just how sophisticated some of the writing in the Hebrew Bible is that I had originally kind of tossed out as
Right.
like fairy tales, you know? So I'll say that.
That's great. Well, I look forward to you sharing that kind of stuff. I definitely
Yeah.
do. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing
Thanks for having
your
me.
story. It was a pleasure. And I'm sure this will be very helpful to very many people.
I hope
If
so.
you guys didn't have any super chats, I'm going to scroll through this real quick. No super chats. All right.
Ooh, just kidding.
Yeah, no, it's all good. We'll catch you.
Just
We'll be back
kidding.
this Sunday with Nurch, myself, Albert Kim, and Jay Witt. Look forward to seeing you guys 11 o'clock Eastern for Nurch. Jessica, we will catch you on the socials. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Bye, y'all.
All right, peace.
Bye.